Based K through 12 education? What is that? I mean, my God, there's some crazy things going on over in Woodland Park, Colorado, and we're going to talk about that. I'm joined by Dexter Tarbox, contributor. This is the New England Take. I'm your host, AJ Kierstead, the NewEnglandTake.com to get more from us. And like and subscribe. Check this out on YouTube. Check out the podcast feed. Just search for the New England Take on all that. And we also broadcast on WKXL Fridays at 6 p.m. So welcome back, Dexter, and let's pull up this next article that I came across and was just it was a journey to read because not everyone necessarily is an honest actor in this, but the results I'm hoping are going to be productive. So this is NBC News. Trump was
not the least, the authors of the article. Yeah,
exactly. They're definitely partisan, that's for sure, especially NBC News. Trump was great at this. How conservatives transformed a Colorado school district. I'll link this in the episode description if you want to check out the full article by Tyler Kincaid. And what happened was in Woodland Park, a small mountain town that overlooks Pikes Peak, became the first and so far only district in the country to adopt the American birthright social studies standard created by right-wing advocacy group and warns of a steady whittling away of American liberty. That's ultimately, this is a conservative guy unhappy with the woke, emotion teaching-centered nature of what was going on in the school district and is tossing the table Trump style.
You know, I say my initial reaction to the article is let's have more of this. For far too long, I think that conservative-minded people have been resigned to allow the left to colonize the field of education. And if they can hit back now against this status quo by democratic means, vis-a-vis electing a conservative slate of school board candidates, as they did in this Colorado community, the more power to them.
Yeah, definitely. And I will just say,
certainly it's worth saying. Have I lost you?
No, I think there was a delay. So the one thing I would say is the superintendent and the board have done some kind of shady things. But if I had to guess, these are the same shady things every single school district or city council does across the country. These are a bunch of part-timers that kind of do it off to the side and have their own political agendas. No one's clean in any school district that's going down this route, if I had to guess. But generally speaking, like one of the big things that really stood out and is they said no more social workers. They're not taking any more grants for like they had like almost every kid with social workers and school counselors on at least weekly basis. Like, how much time are students missing out of education because they're doing this?
Well, in fact, the state of Colorado had enacted a policy for voluntary but universal mental health coaching for all the students in the public school system, which this district, under the new leadership, opted itself out of. The state of Colorado itself has a policy of sort of very wide-reaching social services, essentially, provided to students in the setting of the school. But more broadly, I'd say, and kind of touching on what we talked about at the beginning, I would say that NBC in this article by Tyler, what's his name, unsurprisingly did their best to paint this whole scenario as some sort of a travesty. But the facts are that the conservative board members here were overwhelmingly elected. The efforts since, to recall them, have flatly failed, and the enrollment in the school district has increased. So again, they've tried very hard to paint this as a very horrible, draconian situation that's been imposed in this district. Yeah, again, not applying for those grants to renew the social services, et cetera. But aside from that, the only supposed negative that they could really cite was this wave of resignations, which has apparently taken place. But I say to them, good riddance. One of the particular cases that they cited in the story, or that they sought to highlight, was a teacher who presided over a class called civil disruption, or some sort of similar nonsense. And I mean, if that's the type of faculty that this school district is losing, don't let the door hit you as you go. I hope we can achieve the same thing here.
It's even worse than that. The elective class was called civil disobedience.
Oh, worse, yeah.
Yeah, the English teacher created the class in 2015 to trace protest movements like Black Lives Matter back to America's founding. I I love the concept of civics education being part of the backbone. I got a really good civics education growing up where you learn about the divisions of government, how it works. I really wish there was a little more on the state level with how it worked, but whatever, there's only so much time they could do it. But this onslaught of programs that are specifically oriented to teach not it's civic engagement in the loosest term. It's civic activism. It's not learning how the government works. So when someday you can go in and make changes as you see fit. We're gonna teach how to submit a bill in order for the lunchroom to stay open for an extra 5 minutes or something like that. No, it's racial equity, DEI, and Black Lives Matter, and all these other sorts of activist movements. Instead, why are tax dollars that we're contributing paying for teachers to teach kids to fight the government? Like, no, they should learn how to operate within the government. It's the reason why I think we have this rash of people, especially in our generations, where they think that putting on a P-word hat and marching in the streets is the way you get the government to change, as opposed to running for office.
And one of the teachers who was either resigned or dismissed, I can't recall, the circumstances were that she was encouraging protest against this new administration. And one of the quotes that came from her, I believe she did resign, actually, as I'm recalling the quote, was that, well, if I can't openly and honestly engage in a conversation with my students, then I don't want to teach here. Who said to you that that was your role, to openly and honestly engage in a conversation with their students? That's not the role of a civics teacher, is to sort of engage in a dialogue about her beliefs and how to implement them, or indeed any beliefs. It is to teach. It is to teach the facts of how one engages civilly within the system of our government, and not to have, at this level of education at least, a back and forth discussion about the specifics of her or anyone's political positions.
Yeah. We need a recentering of education, the K through 12 system. In my opinion, going back to like I'll get called a moron for this by the left. I don't really care. It's the basics. You learn your maths, history, science. K through 5 is obviously going to have a level of social emotional learning because they got to learn how to learn. That's an across the board thing needs to happen. They need to know how not to punch their buddy in the playground because they're a little bit upset because the rock they were going to throw at the tree was the rock they wanted to throw at the puddle. Like there needs to be some level of silly things like that. But to center the entire program around diversity, and we need to make sure you learn every single little bit of every single little special group in the country, or in the world for that matter, apparently. He was talking about different aspects of that, isn't what they need to know. Like we always hear, like, we need to teach how to balance a checkbook and do sorts of things like that, but we're not getting that. No, we're getting civil disobedience and making sure that genderqueer is still in the library.
Well, and I'll be called a moron surely for saying it as well, but I think if it's the left that's doing that, in this case, it's likely a badge of honor. But it is the schoolhouse rock, curriculum that really has been abandoned here and frankly ought to be brought back. A neutral stance on the systems of our government, how they work, and how to engage with them. In addition, of course, I'm talking specifically of civics, in addition, reading, writing, arithmetic. But it is that neutral policy of teaching that I think that we need to return to, not discussing how BLM has connections to the critical theory of Harvard and Yale, of the 30s going back to George Washington's day. These are political theories that do not need to be taught in a 6th grade classroom. What needs to be taught are the basics in that classroom. Leave the nonsense to the colleges, because God knows there's plenty of it there and everyone goes there now anyway. It's essentially a second high school, but leave it for there. Let us go back to the core curriculum for the younger students. And so the idea that in this NBC article concerning the Colorado story, they tried repeatedly to cite Republicans, so-called Republicans, who were opposed to this. And I frankly, after having read the article, find it very difficult to understand what these Republicans are opposed, so-called Republicans, are opposed to. Because this seems to me a very common sense a position which should certainly be taken on by all conservatives and really ought to be taken on by the left as well. I suspect that these are the same Republicans who also are supporters of Mitch McConnell and the like. So I was unconvinced, or rather unconcerned, by the NBC citing those cases of a supposed Republican backlash against the policies that have been enacted in Colorado. They seem quite common sense to me.
And if leftists want to stop these like education freedom accounts and charter schools and all these sorts of programs like that and have it be all this funding go back to the public schools, well, guess what? You're going to need to suck it up and deal with the fact some of these school districts are going to go this way. And guess what? If you have enough school districts go this way, maybe there will be some in the middle that won't be ideologically captured and taken over by one side or the other, because eventually it'll balance out. But when you entirely rip it down saying this can't happen ever, you're just going to continue making more extremists in the situation. And when it comes to the teachers leaving, you mentioned that briefly before. I will say, what happened to the days of I don't agree with a company, so I don't work there? This is when it comes to K through 12 education, the public school system, you're at the mercy of elected individuals or people that are appointed by elected individuals. If you can't handle that, education is the wrong field for you. I'm sorry. I understand you want to teach, but go and find a private charter school that maybe aligns wholeheartedly with what you want to do. But don't expect a public school necessarily to forever agree with you ideologically. It's going to change over time. And that's just the way it is. Like I've been very fortunate. I work for companies that I agree with ethically and have allowed me to express myself and doing crazy things like this on the internet. And if I wasn't allowed to do it, I wouldn't be working at those places for it. That's just the way it is. Like I felt comfortable over at UNH because for 12 years working there, because they're open-minded. Yeah, there's the people that I severely disagree with that had influence over there. But generally speaking, the law school especially was very open-minded and let other people express their opinions on things. And so I'm very upset seeing some of the nonsense coming out around some of the student organizations over there, because generally speaking, they're one of the better ones when it comes to open free speech and things like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, and when we look at the district in Colorado in which this took place, number one, it's very small. There's only about 8,000 residents there. And when you look at the voting history of that area, they chose Trump over Biden at a ratio of 2-1. This is a conservative district. And as you say, when you are working in the public sector, which teachers at a public school are, you are at the mercy of elected officials in the form of the school board, and that school board is in a district elected that is very conservative. And even I believe it was the chairman of the newly elected, or the conservative school board, most recently elected school board, either the chairman or the superintendent, who said, when asked, how will the people get their input into the decisions you're making? And he answered, I think perfectly, that they did when they elected us in.
Yep, 100%. All right, we're out of time, unfortunately. I could talk about this probably for hours on end, but we'll leave that for future episodes. Dexter Tarbox, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks, AJ.
He's a contributor over at thenewenglandtake.com, which I run over there. Be sure to email thenewenglandtake.com if you're also interested in contributing. Left, right, I want some other opinions on there. Tell me how I'm a terrible person. As long as you can do it on a monthly basis, I'll have you on. So like and subscribe if you're checking this out on YouTube. I'm your host, AJ Kierstead. Find the podcast feed of the show also on all major podcast platforms. And thank you so much for WKXL for airing the show Fridays at 6 p.m. over there.